The episode was called The New School. It begins on an ordinary morning. Peppa is getting ready for school. She has breakfast with her family and puts on her backpack. George waves to her and says, "Bye, Peppa." And Mummy reminds her to listen carefully during lessons. Peppa happily walks along the path to school, thinking it will be a normal day. When she arrives, she notices that the school building looks a little different. It still looks like her school, but it seems slightly bigger. The windows look taller, and the door looks a little wider. Peppa stops and looks at the building. "Maybe I just didn't notice before," she says to herself. She walks inside and goes to her classroom. Her friends are already there. Susie, Pedro, Rebecca, and the other children are quietly talking. Madame Gazelle stands at the board. "Good morning, children," she says. "Good morning, Madame Gazelle," the children answer. The lesson begins normally. They draw, read, and answer questions. But Peppa begins to notice something strange. When Pedro raises his hand to answer a question, he says exactly the same words he said yesterday. Even his voice sounds the same. Peppa frowns quietly. During recess, the children go outside. Susie says, "Let's play!" But she says it exactly the same way she did yesterday. Peppa stops. "Susie, didn't we play this yesterday?" Peppa asks. Susie smiles and replies, "We always play here." Peppa isn't sure what she means. After recess, the children go back into the classroom. The lesson continues, but Peppa notices something else strange. The clock on the wall hardly moves. The minute hand stays almost in the same place. Peppa looks at the clock, then at the teacher. "Madame Gazelle, what time is it?" Peppa asks. The teacher calmly replies, "It's time to learn." Peppa looks a little confused. When the lesson ends, the children stand up and walk toward the door. Peppa is the last one to leave. She walks through the door and suddenly stops. In front of her is the same classroom again. The same board, the same desks, the same children. Susie is sitting in her place. Pedro raises his hand, and the teacher says again, "Good morning, children." Peppa slowly sits down at her desk. She begins to feel a little uneasy. "We already did this," she whispers. But the other children just continue with the lesson. Peppa tries to change things. She answers questions earlier than before. She tries to leave the classroom sooner. She even says different words, but everything around her continues almost exactly the same way. When the lesson ends again, she walks to the door very carefully. This time she watches closely where it leads. She opens the door and finds herself in the school hallway. Everything looks normal again. Children are laughing, talking, and getting ready to go home. Susie walks up to Peppa. "Do you want to play tomorrow?" she asks. Peppa slowly nods. "Yes, tomorrow." She leaves the school and looks back at the building one more time. Now the school looks completely normal. When Peppa arrives home, Mummy asks, "How was your day at school?" Peppa thinks for a moment. "A little strange, but it was fine." Daddy smiles and says, "Sometimes school just feels longer than it really is." Peppa smiles too, but she still looks thoughtful. The episode ends with Peppa remembering the classroom for a moment and quietly saying, "I hope tomorrow will be a new day."